appreciate that. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. Hey, I just want to just welcome you. I'm so excited that you're here today. I always say that, but I am always excited that you're here. I'm especially excited today because we're starting a brand new teaching series that will take us all the way to Easter, which is the Super Bowl of Christianity. Yeah. It's going to take us all the way to Easter, and the series that we're starting today is called Dinner with Jesus. Dinner with Jesus. Why? Why would I want to do a series called Dinner with Jesus? Well, because I like to eat. No, but more than that, because I believe that meals have the potential to be powerful moments for people. That meals have the ability to become life-changing moments, these opportunities for transformation. In fact, I had a meal like this a little over 2 decades ago. In fact, 20 years ago, something happened that has forever changed the face of fast food dining for me. 20 years ago, 12 young men, and I don't think it's a coincidence that that's the exact same number as the disciples of Jesus. 12 young men met at Wendy's in Cottage Grove, just a little south of here. We met together to participate in what has been considered by many to be a milestone in human achievement. 20 years ago, 12 young men accepted the challenge long before the planking challenge or the Tide Pod challenge of TikTok era. Accepted this challenge that we designated the Wendy's Dollar Menu Challenge. Now, what is the Wendy's Dollar Menu Challenge, you might be asking? Well, in short, here it is. You get one sitting to eat every item on the Wendy's Dollar Menu. Clearly now, due to inflation, this no longer exists in its form that it once was. But at that time, the dollar menu was comprised of 12 or 11 items. So you had to eat a junior bacon cheeseburger, a junior cheeseburger deluxe, a double cheeseburger, a Biggie's fries, a 5-piece chicken nuggets, a baked potato, a chili, a side salad, a Caesar side salad, a Frosty, and a Biggie drink. All of these items in one sitting. You had to be consumed in one sitting. You couldn't get up, couldn't do anything. You had to sit there and eat these items. And of the 12 of us that accepted the challenge that day, only 5 completed it. And I am honored and slightly ashamed to say that I was included not among the dollar menu quitters, but rather that day I joined the elite list of dollar menu completers. Seriously, no need for standing ovation. You can stay seated. You can feel free to just sit where you are currently. Now, following that meal, I found that I would never be the same again. My internal organs have changed permanently. But it wasn't just my body that was forever changed that moment after that meal. Something else changed as well. That meal caused us to experience not just the expanding of our waistbands, but also a tightening of our friendship, a tightening of the relationship, a strengthening of the relationship that we had with one another. Seriously, after this metaphorical Last Supper, as I vowed to never eat at Wendy's again, as I lay in my stretchy pants, paralyzed on the floor of my apartment, I realized a weighty truth, something of huge significance, which was this: that there is something life-changing about being invited to dinner. That there's something life-changing that happens when you get an invitation to eat with someone else. You see, a little over 20 years ago, right before that meal, I had moved to the Twin Cities, and it was a new area for me. I was far, far away from my hometown in rural Ohio. I just started a new job, and I was leaving behind everything that I had considered familiar at that time. I had packed up all my belongings with my Ford Focus in tow, leaving behind my family, leaving behind lifelong friends, leaving behind this house that I had restored with my dad, leaving behind everything I knew to be comfortable. And for the very first time, 20 years ago, very first time in my life, I found myself disconnected and on the outside of things. That was until I was invited to be part of this meal. And even though I was the new guy, even though I was an outsider, what began as a group of guys who had nothing in common or nothing connecting us other than the fact that we all went to the same church together, after that meal, we became friends. But what started for me as a group of strangers, after this life-changing invite to be part of a meal, we ultimately turned into this band of brothers. And amazingly, after that meal, over the years of our life together, I've had the privilege of walking alongside of them, of being part of their life as they were a part of my life. And in addition to sort of the endless recountings of the story of our shared gluttony, even over more meals, I've had the privilege of walking along with them as we struggled with life and the issues of life, walking with them as we all individually graduated from our education programs or trainings, walking with them as they changed jobs, walking with them as they moved to new states or joined the military, walking with them as they broke down and cried over acceptance letters and rejection letters, walking with them as they ended relationships and started new ones, walking with them as they fought with and forgave family members, with them as they bought new cars or new houses or confessed deeply painful experiences or experienced forgiveness from sin, walking with them as I gave them my wisdom of the ages advice, and as they poured into my life with wisdom as well. And as I look back over all those encounters with that band of brothers, the question is, where did it all begin? Where did it start? It started with a dinner invite. You see, there's something life-changing about being invited to a dinner. And I think that this is especially true when it comes to Jesus. Because Jesus knew this better than anybody else. In fact, one of the things that's so unique about Jesus' eating strategy is he was incredibly intentional about it. And if you're familiar with the gospel stories, the biographies of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you've probably already recognized this, that he had a very intentional eating plan. That Jesus' day-to-day activities were filled with meals. And Jesus invited very unique individuals to these meals. He would invite the outsiders that would have been excluded if anybody other than Jesus was hosting that particular meal. And this sort of invitation, when you were invited by Jesus to a meal, that changed you in a way that you would never, ever be the same. So as part of this series and part of today's message, I want to walk you through what I think might be the most famous example of this reality. So if you have a Bible or your Bible app with you today, I want to invite you to join me in Luke chapter 19. Luke chapter 19. And I'm going to introduce you to a guy who literally went out on a limb to find Jesus. And when we look at his life, we're going to learn a little bit more about how Jesus works and what we're supposed to be up to as his followers, individually, and maybe more importantly, especially as a church. And so I'm going to read the first 3 verses, and let's see what we can find out about this person who is trying to find out about Jesus. Luke 19, we're going to start in verse 1, reads like this. He, Jesus, entered Jericho and was passing through. In verse 2, there was a man named Zacchaeus who was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. Now, these first couple of verses, they give us a ton of information about who this guy Zacchaeus really was. For example, what did Zach do for a living? He was a tax collector. A tax collector, huh? Every young kid's dream, right? Yeah. Growing up, we all have dreams about what we want to be one day. Take a second and travel back in your own mind to when you were a kid. As you do that, some of you need to be careful because that's a pretty long journey. I don't want you to get lost there. So just kind of go back as far as you're comfortable and answer the question, as a child, what did you want to be when you grew up? And turn to somebody near you and tell them. Take a second, talk amongst yourselves. What did you want to be when you grew up? What did you want to be when you grew up? A hermit. Not Kermit, but a hermit. Is there like a degree program for that? Or you just choose the life and get sort of a hoodie and... All right, good. Okay, quick survey. Of the answers, how many of you wanted to be something like in a uniform, like a firefighter, a police officer, crew of the Star Trek Enterprise, etc.? Anybody? No uniformians? Oh, in the back, I see that hand. All right. Now, something in the art world. How many of you wanted to be something in the art world? Like a musician, an actor, painter, writer. What did you want to be? Writer? What did you want to be, Bill, in the uniform? Marine. Very good. All right, how about something in the sports world? Basketball, baseball pro, bocce ball expert? No sportians here, okay. How about in the healing professions, like doctor, nurse, counselor, okay. What about you, Carla? What was your answer? A cowgirl on a ranch in Montana. That's amazing. All right. Larry, what about you? What do you got back there? What did you want to be when you grew up? All right. President? Does he approve that message? Oh, anybody tax? Oh, yeah. Like a truck driver, like semi-trucks? Yeah, big truck driver. Big Bertha kind of deal, right? Large Marge, I think, is from Pee Wee Herman's. Anyway, tax collector. Anybody wanted any ambition of tax? No. Larry, was that yours? That was not yours. All right. Any take? No, not a single one. I don't think anybody as a child grew up. Man, when I grew up, I want to be a tax collector. I think you sort of fall into that. I don't know that you choose that. Tax collectors, they've never been popular in any society, any context, any culture. Never. And in the time of Jesus, that's true as well. Tax collectors were especially despised and detested and loathed and abhorred and hated. Thank you, thesaurus.com, right? Like, no one liked them. Real quick, how many of you have seen that show Dirty Jobs? Anybody ever watch that? Three of us? Okay, good. The guy that does the show called Dirty Jobs, his name's Mike Rowe, and he hosts this show, and it's absolutely insane. Each episode is dedicated to participating in the most vile and disgusting jobs that this planet has to offer. And I've only seen a couple of them because I get gaggy watching them, and I can't do it. But if Mike Rowe was around during the time of Jesus, there would have been a handful of jobs that he would have wanted to highlight on his show. In the first century world of the ancient Near East context, the rabbis and religious leaders would frequently compile lists of dirty jobs, of despised vocations, and then they would forbid people from engaging in them. And the list sort of deviates a little bit from area to area or from region to region. On some of the lists, it included like doctors and butchers, because these professions tended to cater to the wealthy and exploit the poor. But most lists included certain professions, not because they were dishonorable, but because they were stank nasty, like tanners of animal skins. If you've ever been around that is rank. But not just that, another one that made almost all the list as well was the profession of dung collector. Dung collector, that's a thing. What? Yeah, you heard me right. If you were sort of desperate for a job, in this first century world. You could go on to LinkedIn and find a gig as a gatherer of doo-doo. This profession of dung collection was so abhorrent, in fact, that if a woman married a man and at some point during their marriage he decided to become a DC, a dung collector, she could actually legally divorce him, take him to court, and then proclaim these words to the judge: "I thought I could endure it, but I can't." And then the judge would grant the divorce on the spot and give the woman a pretty significant settlement. Lesson here: mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be dung collectors. I think that's the takeaway, right? Now, when you look at the list of dirty jobs in Jesus' day, below the gambler, below the scam artist, below even the dung collector, you'd find the most despised job of all: tax collector. And the reason for this is what they had to do and how they did it. The reason that it was so despised had to do with the why and how these taxes were extracted from their fellow countrymen. During the time of Jesus, Israel was occupied by the Roman Empire. And like every conquering nation, the Romans were very interested in squeezing as much money out of the countries that they dominated. So they required the payment of taxes, lots and lots of taxes, and they sent the locals out to collect those taxes. And here's how the system worked. The Roman government, they would let people bid on the right to be a tax collector for a certain region. So someone might say, "Caesar, I think I can get you $10 million in taxes from Washington County." And then another guy would say, no, I think I can get $12 million for you. Another guy says, no, Caesar, I can get you $15 million. And the person with the highest bid would get the job. And then the tax collector would then set out to collect as much tax as he thought he could possibly get away with. He paid Rome what he promised them, and then the rest was his to keep. You see, the system was set up to keep those who were collecting taxes highly motivated to feed their greed. This is why verse 2 would have been so incredibly painful for the original hearers of this account to hear. Look at it again, verse 2. It said, "There was a man named Zacchaeus who was a chief tax collector," and he was what? He was rich. You see, being a tax collector was bad, but you absolutely couldn't get any lower than a rich tax collector, because that meant that he was fleecing his fellow Jews for the Romans and for personal profit. But did all of that money make him happy? Sometimes having it all isn't going to be enough. But what we think we have isn't really what we need. And many of us have found this to be true in our own lives, where we've tried to pursue relationships in such a way that if we could just get that person, then we would be happy, or we would be fulfilled, or if I could just get the right job, or if I could just live in that right neighborhood, if I could just retire at such and such an age and in such and such a lifestyle, if I could just do these things, then that would make me happy. That pursuit. It looks different for everybody. Zacchaeus, it was the pursuit of money. But what is that pursuit for you? And have you found and discovered that what we think we need isn't what we really need at all? You see, it turns out there was something missing in Zach's life, and I think that's why he does what he does in verse 3. Look at it. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but he was not able to because of the crowd, since he was a short man. I feel his pain. I feel it deeply. Verse 4, "So running ahead of the crowd, he climbed up a sycamore tree, for the Lord he wanted to see," as the song says, to see Jesus, since he was about to pass that way. You see, it's interesting. Something's drawing Zach to Jesus, and he thought he was looking for Jesus, but he quickly finds out that Jesus was actually looking for him. Look at verse 5. When Jesus came to that place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, which makes me wonder, when was the last time someone didn't just call him a name, but used his actual name? And not only does Jesus acknowledge this swindler by name, he also invites himself to Zach's house for some burgers and some brats on the grill. Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, because today it is necessary. It is necessary for me to stay at your house. I'm coming over to eat, buddy. And that dinner invite changes everything. Look at verse 6. Verse 6 says, so Zacchaeus quickly came down and welcomed him with joy. Welcomed him joyfully. But not everybody's happy about this, by the way. Look at verse 7. All who saw it began to complain. He's gone to stay with a sinful man, guy lower than a dung collector. Verse 8, but Zacchaeus stood there and he said to the Lord, look, I'll give half my possessions to the poor, Lord, and if I have extorted anything, if I have this rich tax collector, no, yes you have. And if I have extorted anything from anyone, I'll pay it back 4 times as much. Why? Well, Jesus says today salvation has come to this house because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save the lost. This is so good, Bethany. So good. Zacchaeus thought he was looking for Jesus up in a sycamore tree. But Jesus, the Son of Man, was actually looking for him because he came to seek and save the lost. And what happens when someone finds Jesus, or rather Jesus finds them? Well, they change. They change. They're never the same. Because what started as a dinner invite quickly became the basis for a brand new life. You see, there's something life-changing about being invited to dinner, especially when that invitation is about Jesus. See, only Jesus can take a tight-fisted scoundrel like Zacchaeus and turn him into a kind and compassionate and a generous person. In fact, that's the business that Jesus is in. He's in the business of seeking and saving those things that are lost, those people that are lost, going out of his way to find the individuals that have made what seems like disqualifying life decisions. He goes out of his way to find those people, those who might be considered despised, or others who have been counted out as outsiders. Jesus is seeking those individuals, those who have real life problems, who are looking for real life answers that results in some real life change. That's the business that Jesus is in. And as his followers, that's the business we, as the church, are in as well. Now, I don't know if you've heard this yet, but 3 Sundays from now is Easter. And some people have even some really wise people have even called it the Super Bowl of Christianity. And so I want to invite you over the next few weeks to try to imitate Jesus in this way. As followers of him, we are called to be like him. So I want to invite you to be like him in this way, to put up your radar for the Zacchaeuses in your world. The Zacchaeuses at your workplace, the Zacchaeuses that live across the street. Maybe they're across the table, even in your own family. And like Jesus, offer them an invite. Maybe to dinner, maybe to coffee, but definitely to the Easter service on Sunday. I mean, maybe you do it Jesus style and invite yourself over to their house. That's been my strategy for years, and it works great. I'm coming to your house today. Maybe it's that, if you're so bold. Maybe not. But definitely take the opportunity to invite them to this house, to this church. Because if they feel far from God in just a few Sundays, they will hear about a God who is standing at the door of their life and knocking. And if they are willing to open that door, what they're going to find is that Jesus is ready to come in and share a meal with them as friends. So as we prepare for this in the next couple weeks, I want to invite you to take the risk, to have the conversation, to make the call, to send the text, to give the offer, to extend the invite. Why? Well, when it has to do with Jesus, there is always something life-changing about an invitation. Let's pray. God, we thank you for this account. We thank you for Zacchaeus. And for many of us, it brings remembrance of a children's song. But what he did in that moment of courage and boldness has resonated at so many levels for so many people for so many years. And God, I pray that it would reverberate in our hearts as well. That as we approach the most important holiday in the world, the remembrance of your resurrection, the thing that started this whole deal, I pray that we would be like Jesus and offer invites as well. That as we are walking along and as your Spirit prompts our hearts, that we would have the boldness to speak where you've called us to speak. As you've put people on our hearts, that we know that they feel far from you, that we would be bold enough to send the text, to make the call, to write the note, to offer the invitation, to meet this Jesus who wants to have a meal as friends. God, help us to know those moments, to see them, make them unmistakable to us, so that we take advantage of them, so that we partner with you in what you're doing in the world of seeking and saving the lost. God, that's our heart. And we know that comes from a place of goodness, as one who is a good, good God, a good, good Father. God, we want to be able to share that good news with those around us, with those that you give us, with those that you put in our paths. We thank you that somebody did that for us. And God, we're ready to do it as well. We pray these things in Jesus' beautiful name. And all God's people said,